There's a particular kind of tired that has nothing to do with how much sleep you've had. It's the tired of lying awake, mind still running through tomorrow's plan, next week's decisions, the outcome you're hoping for so badly you can feel yourself gripping it, even in the dark. You go over the conversation again, the timeline again, the what if this doesn't work out again. You're not just living your life, you're managing it, steering it, bracing it against every possible way it could go wrong. And somewhere underneath all that effort is a question you've probably never said out loud. What if I just stopped trying to control all of this? It feels almost dangerous to think that, like letting go would mean everything falls apart. Like if you're not the one holding it all together, pushing, planning, forcing, nothing will happen at all. So you keep gripping, tighter if anything, and yet somehow the harder you hold on, the more exhausted you feel and the less things actually seem to move. If that sounds familiar, that quiet, bone-deep exhaustion of trying to force your life into the shape you think it needs, I want you to know something clearly. The grip itself might be the problem. Carl Jung, one of psychology's most profound thinkers, believed something that sounds almost countercultural today. He observed that the most exhausted, most stuck people were very often the ones fighting hardest to force their own path, controlling every outcome, gripping every decision, refusing to trust anything beyond their own effort. And he believed the way out wasn't more willpower, more planning, more control. It was surrender. Now, I know that word can feel uncomfortable, maybe even a little frightening. Surrender can sound like giving up, like losing your direction, like letting life happen to you instead of shaping it. But that is not what Jung meant, and it's not what this video is about. By the end of this, you're going to understand exactly what surrender actually means. Not weakness, not passivity, not resignation. Something far more powerful. Something that might finally let your hands rest without your life falling apart. So if you're tired, genuinely deeply tired, stay with me, because what you're about to hear might be the exact thing you've been missing. It felt like your own personal struggle a moment ago, didn't it? That grip, that exhaustion, that fear of letting go. But here's something worth knowing. Carl Jung believed this fight doesn't just live in you, it lives in all of us, quietly, as part of how the mind is built. Jung made an important distinction between what he called the ego and what he called the self. The ego is the part of you that says I, your conscious identity, your planner, your protector. It's the part that wakes up every day trying to keep you safe, capable, and in control. The self, on the other hand, is something deeper, a wiser, more whole part of you, connected to something larger than your immediate fears and 5-year plans. Some call it intuition, some call it soul. Many, including the title of this video, simply call it God. Here's the problem Jung identified. The ego, in its attempt to protect you, often mistakes control for safety. It doesn't trust that things can unfold well without its constant management, so it grips, it plans obsessively, it tries to force outcomes, not out of wisdom, but out of fear. Fear of uncertainty, fear of being hurt, fear of the unknown taking you somewhere painful. Picture a swimmer caught in a current. Every instinct tells them to fight it, to swim hard, directly against the pull, forcing their way back to where they think safety is. But anyone who understands currents knows this is often the most dangerous response. Fighting directly against a current exhausts a swimmer far faster than the water itself ever could. Ironically, the safer path is to work with the current, angling with its direction, conserving energy, trusting the water's movement to eventually carry them back to shore. This is not passivity. The swimmer isn't going limp and floating aimlessly. They're still moving, still aware, still making choices, just not fighting the current head-on out of panic. That's what Jung believed real surrender looked like psychologically. Not the ego collapsing into helplessness, but the ego finally trusting the self,
trusting that deeper wisdom enough to stop forcing every outcome through sheer will. Which brings us to something most people get wrong about surrender, something that keeps so many of us stuck in the exhausting grip a moment longer than we need to be. That's the psychology behind it, but most people resist this idea because of one big misunderstanding, the fear that surrender means giving up. It's an understandable fear. If you've spent years believing that effort and control are what keep your life from falling apart, then "let God take the lead" can sound like a quiet form of quitting, like you're being asked to stop trying, stop planning, stop caring about outcomes, and just hope things work out. And if that's what surrender meant, it would be reasonable to resist it. No one wants to trade responsibility for helplessness. But that's not what Jung meant, and it's not what real surrender looks like. Surrender is not the absence of effort, it's the release of attachment to outcome. Let's make this concrete. Imagine someone searching for a new job, someone who genuinely wants this next step to work out. Full effort looks like this. They update their resume carefully, they research companies, they send out applications, they show up to interviews prepared and present. None of that changes. The doing still happens fully and honestly. What changes is what happens after the doing. Instead of lying awake each night mentally replaying every interview answer, obsessively checking their email, gripping the exact timeline of when the offer should come or which company it should come from, they do the work and then they loosen the grip on controlling exactly how or when it unfolds. They trust that having done their honest part, the rest doesn't need to be forced by their anxiety. That's surrender, not less effort, less anxious control over things that were never fully in their hands to begin with. This is such an important distinction, so let's say it clearly. Surrender is not helplessness, it's active trust. It takes real courage to do your part fully and then consciously choose to release your grip on the outcome, especially when your instinct, your ego, is screaming at you to hold on tighter, to control every variable, to force the timeline into the shape you've decided it needs to take. If this ever felt exhausting, trying to manage every possible outcome of your career, your relationships, your healing, if you've ever felt like the moment you stop pushing, everything will collapse, I want you to hear this. That fear is common. So many people carry it, quietly, believing their grip is the only thing holding their life together. But Jung would gently challenge that belief. He'd ask, what if your grip isn't holding your life together at all? What if it's actually the thing exhausting you without ever changing the outcome you're so afraid of? Because understanding the difference between surrender and giving up is one thing, feeling the actual cost of the grip you've been holding, that's something else entirely. Understanding surrender is one thing, but let's be honest about what forcing has actually been costing you. Because it does cost something. Every day you spend gripping, controlling, forcing outcomes to bend toward your plan, it takes something from you. Even when it looks from the outside like discipline, like ambition, like just being responsible. The first cost is burnout, the kind that doesn't heal with a weekend off because it isn't really about being physically tired. It's the exhaustion of a nervous system that never gets to fully rest because some part of you is always managing, always calculating, always bracing for what might go wrong next. And underneath that burnout is often anxiety, a low hum of dread that follows you even into ordinary moments because your sense of safety has become tangled up with your ability to control what happens. Then there's the resentment, the quiet bitterness that creeps in when, despite everything, the planning, the pushing, the sheer effort, something still doesn't go the way you needed it to. And in those moments, forcing doesn't just fail to protect you from pain, it adds a second layer of pain on top of it. Not just, this didn't work out, but I did everything right and it still fell apart. That particular ache of feeling like your effort should have guaranteed a different outcome is one of the most exhausting forms of suffering there is. Here's a metaphor worth holding on to. Imagine scooping up a handful of sand and gripping it as tightly as you can out of fear of losing it. What happens? The tighter your fist closes, the faster the sand slips out between your fingers. But hold your hand open, palm relaxed, sand resting gently across it, and somehow more of it stays. Control works the same way. The tighter we grip our plans, our timelines, our expectations of how life should unfold, the more it seems to slip away from us or arrive twisted into something we didn't want. If this resonates, if you recognize this exhausting belief that trying hard enough can prevent pain, prevent failure, prevent uncertainty from ever touching your life, please hear this gently. That belief often isn't really about ambition. For many of us, it's a trauma response. Somewhere along the line, uncertainty felt dangerous, so control became a form of safety. Gripping tightly became the only way we knew to feel secure in an unpredictable world. If that's you, you're not alone in this.